to say the emperor is naked. This only has value because everybody agrees it has. The first country to say that we believe as a nation that this is the wrong direction is going to set off an avalanche. And if you look at, I believe Europe and Sweden particularly is in a unique position to do that. First of all, for some reason we've had this discussion for quite some time, and it's matured quite a bit. It's gone very far if you compare it to other countries. But more interestingly, when compared to the US, copyright laws are at the state level, whereas in the US they're at the federal level. That means Sweden is at liberty to change its copyright laws to quite some extent, while at the same time enjoying this great shield of the European Union from trade sanctions. The US is not going to come bullying Sweden for trade sanctions because the European Union is going to stand up for us. That means essentially that I regard Sweden as a bowling pin for changing copyright worldwide. We sometimes tell media we're going to change Sweden, Europe, and the world in that order. And they sort of take a step back when they see and look in my eyes that I'm being totally serious. So can you change copyright? Yes, I believe you can, because we have a very strong political movement on 3 fronts in Sweden. It's being very successful. It's gaining ground in Parliament as well as outside. We now have the 3rd largest political youth section in Sweden. Got some media on that. So I believe it's both necessary and possible to change copyright the parliamentary way.
Rasmus, you want to say?
Yeah, more in connection to what John was saying about, I think about the thing with free licenses for software or for music or whatever. About 5 years ago when we started Piratbyrån, these were more like 2 separate questions, or appeared like. On one hand, we had the free software people. On the other hand, we had the file sharing people. And they didn't get really that good together. And today I see a completely different situation, and I think that's for good reason. Because everyone see that in the end it's the same freedoms being threatened. And it's getting more and more obvious that copyright today is not so much about saying you may copy this work, but you may not copy this. But it's more about regulating entire tools, entire technologies. And then it also threatens to undermine the freedoms that Creative Commons, for example, wants to realize. And the case of Pirate Bay is a perfect example. That's a case where the copyright lobby wants to criminalize open indexes over files. Basically, regardless what the files contain, they want to force indexers to be publishers. We also have examples like stream ripping tools being criminalized, circumventions tools, software for restricted content, and so on. But the general tendency of copyright in the 21st century is regulating tools and technologies. And when that's done, then our licenses might be not worth the paper there it's written on, if it's paper. But anyway, yeah.
Well, debates,
yeah.
Do you think that a new technology will come across that will simply render copyright moot? In other words, a BitTorrent that simply, there's no way to audit it to find out who's doing what. And that would simply get rid of this issue.
That already exists, but we're not going to move until that direction until we really need it. The thing is also that we don't want people to move in that direction. We could have already forced people to use something like that on Pirate Bay today, but the problem would be that we also would take a stance on, yeah, we're doing something bad, we have to hide. And that's been one of the main issues with running Pirate Bay, that we're very proud of what we do and we believe in it, and we want other people to understand that you don't have to hide. The situation in Norway, for instance, is totally different. If you stand out the media and you say that you file share, most of the reporters will ask if you want your photo like with mosaic over it and you know, be an anonymous guy in the media. And that's one of the best things about the discussion in Sweden, is that we're very open and we move so much further than just having this, you know, this bad thing called file sharing. And that's one of the biggest things that we need to change in all of the world, and that's the perception of what a pirate is and what the pirate does.
Can I ask another question as well? For me, the whole issue of piracy, it goes hand in hand with the hyper-concentration of media production. The fact that there are just 4 major labels that control virtually all music production. And if you don't talk to those 4 major labels, virtually everyone afterwards has extremely different views about DRM and sharing and pricing. And for me, another way to simply change this piracy conversation is simply to ignore, avoid, harm those top 4 people. And then everyone else with a much more sane approach will use the market to change things.
I don't think that's going to work much. Because these top 4 labels are also pushing for regulations that will give the impression, not the statement, but the impression that the only legal way to acquire culture, acquire prepackaged culture, will be to buy it directly from a licensed shop or something that looks like that label. We're now seeing movement that will make it criminal to download music. I'm just using music as an example here. Even though the artist has given his or her explicit permission from file sharing networks. These 4 labels are actively trying to criminalize anything but their business method.
Now that already has existed for years. I mean, for example, GEMA, until recently in Germany, made it so that if you were a musician who made your own music, you had to pay a license fee for each download of your own music on your own website. And it's only recently, about 2 years ago, where they granted an exception to that. In Italy, that's still the case, and there's a number of other cases.
There's a similar case in Sweden, but it's still not. You still don't get the impression that downloading a piece of music is illegal, even if the artist is given his or her impression, his or her.
But I think that is changing by having all of these discussions. I think it's very
Absolutely.
important that you understand that by being open and being, like we are, very loud about what we do, people understand that that's okay, and we're educating people, and that's also very important.
Exactly, and pointing out the fact that these guys are living in the past, we're the future, we understand what's happening in today's media. These guys are just too used to having luxury and sitting back and expecting money to roll in.
And
So
also-
no, it's not going to happen.
Is your political agenda then, for progress, simply to get as many voters as possible to use the Pirate Bay? I'm serious.
Are you asking Peter or me?
Either of you, actually, probably Peter,
Well,
as a political strategy for change.
Political agenda. I hope that people use the Pirate Bay because either they want something to download or they just, like
So that's
us.
not what you're thinking, because
But
that
I
might
don't
be a
have
very effective way to affect change.
But we're not going for the political angle that way. We're not going for the party angle. We do other parties.
But you are an agent on change.
Sorry,
You're a very strong agent on change.
Yeah, and we use that only in those things that we actually believe in. We only go for copyright issues and then freedom of speech. We never touch any other political subjects, which is very important for us. So we try to stay true to what we do.
I mean, let's say that you had a little bit of money and you started funding mass audience versions of media access, so an iPhone access, something for your set-top box, so that literally everyone ended up being a Pirate Bay customer.
Well, we're not after,
No, I'm asking, what do you
Yeah.
think of that as a strategy for
well, the
affecting
goal
change?
of Pirate Bay is not to be needed anymore,
Okay.
to be honest. We don't want to be, the biggest file sharing network in the world. We just want to be, change stuff. And when we find new technologies, which will come along anytime, we won't be needed. And that's the main goal of Pirate Bay.
And then I think it's what is important today is not only focusing on this point where copyright ends, this progress to this point, but realizing that we already have one leg beyond that point. We are already, in one sense, beyond copyright. We don't live with the general problem of scarcity. We live with the general problem of abundance. And,
Right.
and what we have to do now is to make this abundance meaningful again. And okay, so how do we create how do we find the best ways to create communities to